Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're going deep into Matthew chapter 26,
Oh, yeah.
focusing on those events that lead right up to the crucifixion of Jesus.
Yeah.
A story, well, jam-packed with betrayal and sacrifice and powerful lessons that still resonate even today.
It really is remarkable how Matthew sets the scene. You have Jesus telling his disciples, hey, I'm about to be betrayed and then crucified.
Right.
And then, bam, right after that, we see the religious authorities scheming, plotting how to kill him.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's a sudden shift from these, calm, insightful teachings to this edge-of-your-seat thriller.
It certainly grabs your attention. But why was Jesus seen as such a threat? I mean, enough that these authorities felt like they had to scheme in secret?
They were really worried. Really worried that if they arrested Jesus openly, it would cause, well, a huge public uproar.
I see.
Matthew tells us that the chief priests were involved, the scribes, the elders, they were all in on it, and that really tells us something.
Yeah, what's that?
It tells us that Jesus was incredibly popular with the people, and that popularity, well, it really threatened their authority.
So it was more about protecting their power than anything else.
Exactly. Their power was intertwined with both religious and political influence. They were working hand in hand with the Roman authorities, and Jesus' teachings they were often critical of the status quo, and those teachings could have really destabilized that whole system.
I see. So while Jesus is focused on compassion, challenging injustice, they're worried about losing their grip on power. It's quite the contrast. And then we have that incredibly moving scene with the woman anointing Jesus with perfume.
Yes, such a beautiful symbol of devotion.
The disciples, though,
Yeah,
they criticize her. They're like, this is wasteful. This money could have been better spent on helping the poor.
right.
But Jesus defends her,
He does.
explaining that, no, this was an act of preparing him for his burial.
It's a powerful moment.
It really makes you wonder if the disciples were missing the bigger picture, just for a moment. Focused on the practical rather than the spiritual.
It's a really great point. It highlights how differently people were responding to Jesus.
Right.
Some, like this woman, they saw him as the Messiah. They saw him as someone worthy of such lavish devotion.
Yeah.
Others, well, like Judas, let's just say their motivations were far less pure.
Which brings us to Judas's betrayal. A truly heartbreaking moment. Judas, one of Jesus's own disciples, goes to the chief priests and he offers to betray him for 30 pieces of silver.
Wow.
What could have possibly driven someone so close to Jesus to do something so unthinkable?
It's one of the most enduring mysteries of this story. Matthew doesn't give us a clear answer. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's to force us to grapple with just how complex human motivation really is.
Right.
Was Judas driven by disillusionment? Was it greed? Was it some misguided belief that he could actually force Jesus's hand and provoke a divine intervention? We don't really know.
It's almost like Judas, despite witnessing all of those miracles, all of Jesus' teachings, he never truly grasped the core of his message. It makes you think about the times in our own lives, where maybe we've betrayed someone, even if unintentionally, because we were just focused on the wrong things.
It's a really powerful connection to our own experiences, and this betrayal, well, it sets the stage for the Last Supper, which is such a pivotal moment in the whole Christian tradition.
Right.
Picture it, you have Jesus having this Passover meal with his disciples, and then, boom, he drops not one, but two bombshells.
Oh, wow.
First, he predicts his own betrayal, sends shockwaves through the room, and then he goes and institutes the practice of communion.
It's hard to imagine the tension in that room. First, the announcement that one of them will betray him. And then Jesus takes bread and wine, these everyday things, and says, this is my body. This is my blood. Such a powerful symbol connecting these elements to his impending sacrifice.
Yeah, and that symbolism, it has resonated for centuries. Different Christian denominations have evolved all sorts of interpretations of communion.
Right.
But the core idea, that idea of remembering Jesus' sacrifice through this shared bread and wine, well, that remains at the heart of it all.
It really is incredible how these events continue to hold such profound meaning for millions of people all around the world. But the drama, well, it doesn't end there. Jesus then predicts that Peter, his most devoted disciple, will deny even knowing him 3 times before morning.
Oh, wow.
Of course, Peter, he's adamant. He's like, no way. I would never do such a thing.
This is where Matthew sets up this fascinating contrast between this unwavering faith and then the frailty of human nature.
Right.
And we see a similar tension play out in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus goes there to pray,
Yeah.
fully aware of what's coming, what awaits him. He asks his disciples, hey, stay awake, pray with me. But they just keep falling asleep.
It's such a human moment. Jesus, the Son of God, overwhelmed with sorrow, seeking solace in prayer, while his closest friends can't even stay awake. I don't know about you, but I've definitely been there nodding off during a late-night prayer session or two.
Oh, totally. It makes Jesus so relatable, right? He's facing unimaginable suffering, and even he struggles with the emotional weight of it all.
Yeah.
But just as he's preparing himself, Judas arrives with armed men, and the way he identifies Jesus for them, a kiss.
Oh, wow. It's such a chilling symbol, a gesture of love and friendship twisted into a mark of betrayal. It really sends chills down your spine.
Absolutely. And then the chaos unfolds. Jesus is arrested,
Right.
and one of his disciples, he even tries to fight back, but Jesus, true to his teachings, stops him, reaffirming his commitment to nonviolence.
It's like a powerful reminder that even when facing aggression, even when facing injustice, true strength lies in love and in compassion.
It's a difficult path to follow, but Jesus, he embodies it.
He really does.
Yeah.
And then things kind of accelerate, right? Jesus is brought before the high priest and the council, and they're trying to build a case against him, but their witnesses are so inconsistent.
You really are.
It feels like we're just witnessing this blatant disregard for due process, and it's all orchestrated by those in power.
It really is.
And in this moment of complete vulnerability, the high priest demands that Jesus answer directly. Is he the Son of God?
And Jesus' response is bold. Thou hast said.
Wow.
Such an affirmation of his divinity, which in the context of Jewish beliefs and Roman authority, it was essentially a death sentence.
It really does take incredible courage to stand by your convictions,
Yeah,
especially when facing such dire consequences.
it does.
But while Jesus is on trial, remember there's another drama unfolding. Jesus predicted that Peter would deny knowing him 3 times.
Right.
And just as predicted, it happens. Peter's waiting outside the palace. He's confronted 3 times about being a follower of Jesus. And each time, overcome by fear, he denies it. His denials, they become more forceful, almost ending in this desperate attempt to just distance himself from the whole situation.
It's heartbreaking to watch Peter succumb to fear like that,
It is.
to witness the weight of his betrayal. But it is a stark reminder that even the most devoted followers are still human.
We are.
We make mistakes,
Yeah.
especially under pressure or when we're afraid. It's something I think we can all relate to in some way.
Absolutely. There's just so much packed into this one chapter, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
I think that speaks to the enduring power of Matthew's narrative. He's woven together these themes of betrayal, sacrifice, human weakness
Yeah.
against this backdrop of impending doom and divine purpose. It's rich with meaning and prompts us to grapple with these profound questions about faith and loyalty and the choices we make when we're faced with adversity.
And on that note, let's take a breath and let all of this sink in for a moment. We'll be right back to delve even deeper into this incredible story.
It's fascinating how the idea of prophecy is kind of woven throughout this whole narrative.
Yeah, it's like a constant reminder that everything's unfolding according to this script,
Right.
like it's already been written.
Right. And that brings up some really big questions
Oh, yeah.
about how we understand free will, versus destiny. Like, did Judas really have a choice, or was his betrayal preordained?
The tough one.
Yeah, and was Jesus's sacrifice inevitable? These are these huge theological debates that people have been wrestling with for centuries.
It's not just Judas's actions that seem to, fulfill prophecy. Even Peter's denial, as heartbreaking as it is, it's something Jesus predicted would happen.
Absolutely. That moment where Peter is just paralyzed by fear, right?
Mm.
And he denies knowing Jesus, not once, but 3 times. It's a powerful reminder that we're all capable of weakness, even with the best intentions.
It highlights how even the most devoted followers, they're still human. We make mistakes, especially when we're under pressure or when we're afraid. It's something we can probably all relate to.
Oh, for sure. And yet, Matthew doesn't present this as like a story of condemnation,
Right.
There's a sense of forgiveness and redemption woven into the narrative.
I see that in Peter's reaction after he denies Jesus. He weeps bitterly,
Oh, yeah.
realizing just how serious what he's done really is. It's
Yeah.
this moment of profound remorse, but it also points towards the possibility of reconciliation.
Exactly. Matthew seems to be inviting us to view Peter with compassion and understanding, not judgment. I mean, haven't we all had those moments where we fall short of our own ideals?
Absolutely. And that's what makes this story so relevant. It reflects those complexities of human nature, our struggles with faith, with loyalty, and having the courage to actually stand up for what we believe in, even when it's really hard.
Right. And it also prompts us to think about different models of leadership.
Oh, interesting.
You have Jesus knowing he's facing certain death, and he continues to teach and guide his disciples. Even in those final hours, he's focused on their well-being and preparing them for what's to come.
That's such a striking contrast to the leadership style of those religious authorities, right?
Oh, totally.
They're totally consumed with just maintaining their own power.
Yeah, seemingly at any cost.
It's a powerful example of servant leadership.
It really is.
Even facing unimaginable suffering, Jesus is committed to his mission and to those he loves. And then, of course, we have his response to his arrest.
Yeah.
When one of his disciples tries to fight back and Jesus stops him.
Right.
It's like he's reaffirming his commitment to nonviolence in that moment.
It's such a powerful statement. He's essentially saying that true strength isn't about physical force.
Yeah.
It's about unwavering love and compassion.
And that message continues to resonate today, especially in a world that's often marked by, conflict and violence.
It's a challenging message,
It is.
but one that encourages us to consider different ways of responding to injustice.
So true. So moving on to the trial itself, we see Jesus brought before the high priest and the council. It's a scene full of political maneuvering and false accusations, and just this blatant disregard for justice.
It really is a stark illustration of how power can be used, or misused, I guess I should say, to silence anyone who disagrees and to eliminate those who challenge the status quo.
And yet, even in this moment where he's totally powerless, Jesus remains steadfast in his convictions. When they challenge him, he has to confirm his divinity, and he boldly declares, "Thou hast said."
Wow.
It's a statement that seals his fate, but also affirms his identity and his purpose.
Such a display of courage and conviction considering what he knew he was facing.
And as the trial reaches its peak, we're brought back to Peter's internal struggle.
Yeah.
He's outside the palace, and as predicted, he denies knowing Jesus 3 times. Each denial becomes more and more emphatic,
Right.
ending in this desperate attempt to distance himself from the situation.
It's agonizing to watch Peter's fear, and the weight of his betrayal. But it also highlights how fragile human loyalty really is and the immense pressure that can be put upon even the most devoted followers.
It really makes you think, how would we act under similar circumstances? Would we have the courage to stand up for what we believe in, even when faced with persecution or ridicule? It pushes us to really examine our own values and how deeply we're committed to what really matters. So much is unfolded in this chapter, and yet it feels like we're just starting to explore the deeper meaning and implications of all these events.
It really speaks to the enduring power of this story.
Yeah.
Matthew 26. It's more than just a historical account.
Right.
It's a narrative that continues to resonate, across centuries. It prompts us to wrestle with these profound questions about faith, loyalty, betrayal, and the true meaning of sacrifice.
And with that, I think it's time to pause and reflect on everything we've discussed so far. We'll be back in a moment to wrap things up and consider what this all means for us today. We're back, and wow, this deep dive into Matthew 26 has been quite a journey.
It really has.
Betrayal and sacrifice and courage and despair, it's all there.
Yeah, it's a really dense chapter.
It is.
Packed with symbolism and meaning. But, if we kind of step back from the individual events
Right.
and look at the broader themes, what emerges is this really powerful reflection on the true cost of discipleship.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Matthew makes it very clear that following Jesus, it wasn't about, easy answers or a comfortable life. It came with real challenges and real risks and the very real possibility of suffering.
We see that throughout this chapter, the disciples struggling to stay awake in Gethsemane,
Right.
Peter denying Jesus out of fear, even Jesus himself wrestling with what he knew was coming. It's a stark reminder that being a disciple, it's not about blind faith or pretending we have it all figured out.
Exactly. Matthew's showing us that even those closest to Jesus, they experienced doubt, they experienced fear, they experienced failure, and yet their stories are woven into this larger narrative of hope and redemption.
So maybe it's about acknowledging our own human limitations,
Yeah,
recognizing that we're all capable of both great love and devastating betrayal.
I think so. And maybe it's about finding the courage to keep showing up, even when it's hard, even when we stumble, knowing that grace and forgiveness are always possible.
That's a powerful message,
Yeah.
especially in a world that often feels so divided and so uncertain. It's easy to get caught up in that judgment, in that condemnation. But Matthew seems to be urging us towards a different path.
He is. If we can connect this ancient story to our own experiences,
Right.
we might ask ourselves, where do we see those echoes of betrayal? Where do we see sacrifice in our own lives? When have we been challenged to stand up for what's right, even when it was difficult?
And how can we cultivate that same spirit of compassion and forgiveness that Jesus modeled, even when we're dealing with people who have hurt us or disappointed us?
Those are some really great questions.
They are. They really challenge us to kind of look inward
They do.
and examine our own hearts.
Matthew 26. It's a really powerful and emotionally charged chapter.
It is.
It's a story that continues to resonate across centuries, inviting us to grapple with those fundamental questions about faith and loyalty and betrayal and the meaning of sacrifice.
As you go about your day, think about those moments where you witness these same dynamics, the struggles with loyalty, the temptations of betrayal, and that challenge of living up to our highest ideals. And remember, even in the darkest of times, there's always that possibility of redemption, forgiveness, and hope. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.